Hey everybody, welcome to the Quick Draw, or as I like to call it, the Gun Show.
Ha
ha. Anyway, that joke fell flat. I'm Mike, your host. With me is my co-host, John. We own Young Guns, and we've got a very special guest today with you, Mr. Glomar. Do we call you by your new tag or your old tag?
Either one works, really.
Either one works. Just Mr. X. Let's just do that, Mr. X.
I've been keeping the X pretty constant.
Yeah, see, there you go.
So this is going to be a fun one, actually, because we're going to talk about a little bit about the death of masculinity societies. Mr. X recently on Twitter did a really good thread about an article that was written by someone who I think he forgot he was a man. Or maybe never knew. From the sound of it, it sounds like his dad never taught him how to be a man.
Pretty confused from the start.
So he's very confused.
I blame his father because I let my wife read that horrific article. She can hear me talking, but she can't hear you guys. She's making faces just because I mentioned it. She's horrified.
Oh God, she read it then, eh? That's oh God.
I'm not, horror is a good reaction when you read that article. Like, I can't imagine the lack of self-awareness to write that is phenomenal, actually. Like, you have to be living in your own little world to think that that's actually a positive piece worth writing. I want to gimp my children because they're white and male.
Just the closing line where he's like, he and his wife are sitting there hugging each other and shivering in fear because they have a happy son. Like, oh no, God forbid your son be like happy and gifted.
It's just the most amazing and horrifying thing. Well, it's just as
Wait
bad
till they
as
find out that he likes G.I. Joe or something. I mean, geez.
I know, right?
Oh, that's PTSD right there. Hey, you know that guy is going to like meet therapy.
Joins the military.
You find out his kids like boy things.
If that kid joins the Marine Corps, they're just never going to get over it. They're going to
I know, right? It's like that one feminist who like had the two sons that she talks about how she basically raised them to believe they were just rapists in the making. One of them almost got a job with Ben Shapiro, I remember. But because she was lamenting how they became conservatives because of this, and it's just like, well, yeah, that seems about right.
Here's the thing: I have to wonder how like walled off from society do you have to be to think that's normal? Like I know liberals personally in my life. Like my mentor in college is a flaming voted for Obama twice Democrat liberal. He's actually the reason I'm so conservative today, which is kind of funny. But well, I actually do that. I do tell him it's just like this is your fault. But I mean, so I recognize that there are some insane liberals out there, but I also recognize that there's some not insane liberals. They're a minority, but they exist. Like, how cloistered do you have to be to think that the worst thing that can happen to someone is they decide that they have conservative views?
I think in some cities it's fairly common to be that crazy now. I've heard from people that have lived and worked in San Francisco that, I mean,
or you can pay me to live in California, so
no, same. It is, I think that people, I'm almost thinking that people who try to stay conservative their whole lives but live in San Francisco that long turn into like Michael Savage, like
or the Unabomber.
More likely the latter than the former.
I was gonna say,
but I mean, it's actually brings up a good point though. Like, how do you teach kids to be men if society devalues manhood? Like,
at this point, I don't know how you send your kids to public school and still have them come out as well-adjusted young men. Probably women either, but speaking from a male point of view, I don't see how you send a male child to a public school and have them come out okay.
Oh, I absolutely agree, because I think too, like, public schools, they're almost geared to.
They're run by neurotic cat ladies.
Yeah.
Right. Well, unless
or soy boys. I don't think there's not very many masculine male teachers in public education now.
Because being masculine is literally being again, they say that not all masculinity is toxic. Again, so they say, but in practice, all masculinity.
Yeah, but their definition of masculinity is like 4 beta males with their hands in each other's pockets. So
yeah.
So it's difficult to figure what if
real men shove their hands out of other guys' junk.
Yeah, then what masculinity isn't toxic? And that's really, I think, the question that no one really wants to answer.
Their version of masculinity that is not toxic is female primacy masculinity. It's the happy wife, happy life.
Oh God, yeah, that one.
Yeah. That saying drives my wife up the wall.
But now, never mind. I was gonna say this is coming from a former dom, right? So
as my wife just said, how about happy couple? How about both people consider both people's needs instead of both people considering one person's needs?
Well, that was something I was thinking about earlier today too. Because like most people who see my wife on Twitter know that she can be pretty scary, or at least she comes across that way. I don't find my wife intimidating. Don't tell her I said that. But she is Hispanic. She will stab me, but it's okay.
She'll cut you. It's okay.
She'll cut me, and I'll just be like, cool. But at the same time, but my wife and I, we have an interesting dynamic because we come from a very religious background, so where the man is considered the head of the household, but at the same time, women are considered equal. So there's kind of this. Your wife makes a very good point. Like, why don't we focus on happy couple? If you look at like sitcoms today, if there's any semblance of a nuclear family, right? The dad is always some bumbling. He's the butt of the joke. Yeah, he's always some bumbling oaf. The mom wears the pants in the family. He's just there to provide a paycheck.
Tim Allen, and he gets his show canceled.
Right, exactly.
Actually, my wife watched that show. I liked the first season. The second season was pretty good too. And then I guess they had to tone it down after they got pushed to a Friday slot.
I guess. I mean, and that is true. Is that constant portrayal of men is either, and again, it's either like sitcom or it's like Lifetime Network, where it's and this is an important tie too, because it's where no matter how good a guy seems, he's just some incipient wife beater and like abuser and stuff. That's basically the entirety of the Lifetime Network, and I'm pretty sure that's like every related network. Oxygen, OWN, all those. It's the same basic idea. Men are just incipient rapists and abusers just waiting to come out, and the only reason they're not doing it now is because they just haven't had the right trigger.
But if that's the mentality, then what? I want to know, what value do men have in society besides a paycheck and maybe a stepping stone for women? Like, what's the value of a man in society if we're just going to constantly rip on them?
It's a paycheck, and preferably one they don't have to live with.
Yeah, and here's another thing.
They'd like to keep receiving that paycheck even if they don't live with the guy anymore.
Right, and here's something else to consider, that the response to it, and this actually is even more, I think, damaging to the idea of proper masculinity, is MGTOW, which I don't know. I started looking into that. Heather, that one. Men going their own way. Yeah, and it's one of those philosophies, much like white nationalism, where it's, I think we
used to just send those people to the priesthood.
Right,
send people where?
Priesthood.
Yeah.
If you're not going to get married, go study, go read, go teach, and to be a priest, and then at least your celibacy has an excuse.
Apparently, in this case, some of them aren't celibate. They just refuse to form any relationships outside of like getting laid every so often. But I would argue MGTOW.
I'm sure they pay for it.
MGTOW to me is a lot like white nationalism. It's where I hate the idea. I don't think your ideas make any sense, but it's perfectly understandable why you have them, because it's the same thing to me. I look at MGTOW and I listen to them, because a lot of the people who are MGTOW usually have had some experience with divorce, with
as I said, they usually come across to me as like bitter divorcees. That's it.
Right, and I think that's why, because it's very unless you've got a lot of fortitude and a lot of understanding of what it means to be a man, going through those things can easily push you in that direction.
What did you say? And I want to hear your thoughts on this too. Like, wouldn't you say that MGTOW is an example of the breakdown of masculinity, but in the opposite direction?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
I mean, there's got to be a balance. Like, the reason why I think the reason why the left's views on masculinity are appealing to some is because there is a kernel of truth. Like the idea that men are supposed to be insensitive or that men are supposed to be without emotion, that's not accurate. But the idea that they're supposed to be so sensitive and so tender that they lose their gonads, that's not accurate either. It's like we're dealing with two extremes here. There's got to be like a Goldilocks zone where you have men who are assertive, aggressive, competitive, at the same time tender, protective, and can provide for other individuals, specifically their spouses and their children, because they have a degree of empathy. Like that's my big issue here. This is that we're debating masculinity as if it's inherently evil. And we don't realize that, okay, so then we complain about fatherless homes. Then we complain about absenteeism in the home. Then we complain about, children who don't move out of their house until they're fucking 30 because they don't have a dad like mine. I was like, get the fuck out of my house when you're 18.
It's like, I've taught you well enough to live on your own. Now just go do it. And I think
my dad even had that for you. He's like, you had 18 years to figure it out. Too bad. Okay. Goodbye.
It's like the Bible points out that children are like arrows. Well, the key point to an arrow being useful is to let it go. So that's kind of key. But
are we gonna have can we have like the Marines belt out the Frozen song now? That's still my favorite rendition of it.
Oh God, I think I remember that. Wait, was it? Yeah, it was a bunch of Marines singing "Let It Go," wasn't it?
Yes.
I might have missed that one. I'm not sure that I missed it.
If I missed it, you're like, you mean I avoided it like the plague. Like we don't talk about that.
I actually made sure I never saw it. But and I know that we were mentioning it before was the impact of family courts, and I think family courts are not the cause of this. They're a symptom. They're a symptom of the very thinking that, because I would argue that if you take that saying that the old feminists had, that women need men like fish need a bicycle, that literally is the family courts. It's that saying in legal terms, essentially. Except
a fish with a bicycle can't cut you a check every month.
Right. Exactly. So
if they would only hold that to be true and say, okay, then you two are separate now, go away.
Well, because it also hurts the perception of what children need. Children need their fathers. We how many times do we hear, especially in Black communities that are good examples of the fact that fatherless homes give more.
Look at all of these mass shooters recently. I don't think a single one of them lived with their biological father.
Right.
Most of them didn't live with a father at all, but none of them lived with their biological father.
Right. And
let me say, look at like David Hogg. Where's his dad? And he has some clear sociopathic tendencies.
That's very. I gotta wonder, where is his dad anyway? But
probably getting cucked by someone.
Well, I mean, look at like what was it? When back during the election, when they're like, here are the mothers of these Black kids that got shot by police, and they're the mothers of the movement, and people pointed out quite aptly, didn't see any fathers though. So it's like,
hey, the Black guy said it, so it's okay.
Exactly. Well, I'm not really Black. So Twitter can't seem to keep straight what I am. So
there's still the pool is still open on what I am. So.
That's right.
Oh, you haven't figured out that one out yet?
I was going to say it was sort of like
we're still going with Roof Korean. I think
I think Roof Korean is leading.
I think that's a good choice. So now, X, you mentioned earlier, like, your experience with law, family court is like some of the worst example of what good law.
It's a travesty. It's a mockery of a travesty.
What are some examples?
Well, for example, if your name's on a birth certificate and you are made to pay child support, And let's say you then go and get genetic tests, and you can prove conclusively the child isn't yours. In the best interest of the child, they will continue to force you to pay child support to the mother, even though the court will acknowledge that the child is not yours.
So wait, if you know who the actual dad is,
you may or may not know who the actual dad is, but they've got a child support order against you, and it's in the best interest of the child that the checks keep coming. So even though the court will acknowledge that you are not the father, you still have to keep sending the check every month, or they will bring the massive penalties for being a father who doesn't pay child support against you.
And it works in reverse too. It works in reverse too. That even if you, because again, when I initially went, in dealing with the custody issue with my own son, we had where the first thing they do is they establish a child support order. As far as my rights to be a father to my child, to actually have custody of the child, they didn't give a shit about that. They basically just say
they'll wait months or years, but they make sure the money starts flowing immediately.
Right. They want the money right away, and that's just it. I thought, if I prove, get a paternity test and prove this is my child, then they'll not only want the money, which I was fine with, but then it was also they will give me rights to my child. God, did I not know? And so they literally just, they suck you dry for whatever money they can get. And then they tell you, and by the way, you have no rights whatsoever to your kid. And,
no, matter of fact, this is a restraining order. If you come within 500 meters of the mother, we can send the cops after you.
And then
because she had an ex parte order against you. You didn't get your day in court, but she did.
And even if you get visitation, it's because I know, and again, I know this because I was part of a process. There's a shared parenting bill being put forward in Michigan right now by Representative Jim Runestad, great guy, by the way, met him, he's trying to put this forward, but what they point out is that the so-called reasonable rights of parenting time, and this is in every county in the state, you can pick anyone you want. It will say the same thing. It's every other weekend, and then 2 hours on a Wednesday or something. And that's considered reasonable. And people actually expect you to take that and go, oh yeah, that sounds perfectly reasonable. That is the stupidest thing. But
who lobbies for? I mean, who benefits for these laws? Who's lobbying for these laws? That
I can answer that.
Well, no, I mean, I'm generally curious because I mean, I understand that women in general benefit, but are there women's organizations that have pushed for these laws, or what's the deal here?
Yes, absolutely.
I see you've encountered them.
Yes, the League of Women Voters. Yes, they have women right in the name. Believe me, yes, they do. Every battered women's shelter in the state was empty. Seriously, it was standing room only. When the second time I went into they had a hearing for this bill, and every battered women's shelter in the area pretty much was against the Shared Parenting Act.
Yeah. I tried to bring all the battered men's shelters to the hearing, but there aren't any. So.
Right. So, they don't have those. I was going to say, if men
can't be raped. No, they get a boner.
You're on your own.
That means they like it.
Right. And that's despite the fact that statistics for domestic violence show that men and women are basically about even on that. Yeah. About 50-50, yeah. And that's amazing because they don't care. They really don't care.
And they'll tell you as much, flat out.
Right. And this hurts children because what they're basically being told is your father is not necessary. The court, so when we went for shared parenting, they basically say, okay, when I went to support the bill, and they were just like, well, the Judges Association in Michigan, literally their official position was we're against this. The reason why they're against it is because, well, we already do that. We already choose shared by default. But what they mean is when the parties agree. Yeah, there was a judge who went to a public function saying, oh, well, we know the parties will never agree. So basically they're saying, we know they'll never agree, so let's make it based on the thing we know will never
Our entire court system is adversarial, so why would we ever base anything on agreement?
Right.
The entire court system is adversarial.
Right. And like I said, and this is a symptom because it's based on, again, that idea that masculinity is bad, that men are just incipient. In fact, a representative of the NOW at the hearing I spoke at, I was there, and she basically made the argument that there is no such thing as men who lose their kids just arbitrarily. She said, no, they give they don't men who lose their custody of their kids, it's either because they voluntarily give it up because they know they wouldn't be any good at it anyway, or it's because they're abusers. In her mind, there is no other category.
Yeah, I've been helping a friend of the family in California with his custody issues, and I'll just put it bluntly, horse shit.
Yeah.
This man is a good father who wants to see his kids. He's a better parent than the mother, and he can hardly get his visitation. Like, he has an order, but does she ever follow it?
No, if she violates it, there's no recourse. So,
no.
And again,
they never enforce it against her. So what's the problem? What's the purpose?
And this, I think this is how you get MGTOWs, by the way. This is how you get them. Is you get,
or Unabombers? Yeah, you get some people who will accept it and just say, "I just don't want to deal with women anymore," and you get some people who just snap and go, "I'm going to kill all you." I have to watch my language because I do have a child asleep on my lap. So I may be a little off-brand here tonight.
You just had a little girl or little boy recently?
I prefer not to give too many details. Just
okay, that's fine.
I got you.
But you
doesn't matter.
It's your first, though. I remember that, right?
Doesn't matter. You don't want to you don't want to misgender the child anyway.
Oh, so,
okay.
Because I've got two little. Because the reason I asked is because I've got two little girls, and I remember when I first got married and we were talking about having kids. Like, my dream was always like, oh, I want my oldest. I want to have a lot of kids, but I wanted my oldest to be a boy. I want the oldest to be the big brother, the protector, plus the whole family name thing. And then I had these two little girls, and then I read this article, and I'm like, man, I'm so glad I don't have to raise boys in this day and age.
Yeah, it's not
because how do you outside of your family, right? I mean, I know how I would raise sons. I know how I'm going to raise my daughters. My daughters are going to be feminine, but they're also going to like boy things. They're going to like sports. They're going to like, doing things that typically are attributed to boys. But how do you? I'm trying to say that without sounding like too sexist. But they're gonna like math and they're gonna like science. I mean, I'm allowed to go there because as an engineering student, like that was the most obnoxious thing. You have like 400 guys and maybe 20 chicks, and of the 20 chicks, half of them are already married, and of the half that are single, maybe 3 are good looking. So I mean,
yeah, no selection
whatsoever. I'm allowed to bitch a little bit about women in STEM. Okay, damn right, I want more women in STEM. Well, I did when I was single. Now I don't care.
Disclaimer.
But how do you? My question is, how do you kind of correct for the lack of masculinity? I mean, if you don't have a father who teaches you how to do these things, right? And that was the issue with this guy that wrote this article. His dad really fucked up with teaching him how to shoot a gun.
Yeah, that was.
And then that was
more of a symptom than just the cause. That's
right.
Right, but so what's the root cause of it? How do you fix that so that you raise a generation of boys into men?
The organizations that used to be able to help with that, Boy Scouts, is dead to me. That's
right. Oh, I'm with you there.
Boy Scouts of America are, it used to be a great place to raise your sons, and now I think it's been taken over by the mothers. That's the only way to explain the way they behave now. They behave like Girl Scouts, and I mean that not just from like a masculine, feminine perspective, but from an organizational perspective, the way they are safety conscious all the time instead of, looking for the experiences of the boys.
Right. And I think a lot of that has to do with liability too. Because my church does the Boy Scouts still, and I actually got asked to volunteer as a scoutmaster. I'm like, no, you don't want me to do this because I like to play. I like to play with fire and things that explode. I'm an engineer. Okay, I'm going to teach these kids how to like weld with an acetylene torch. Do you really want me to do this?
Why not?
But when I was a kid, a Boy Scout troop. I mean, our Boy Scout troop had 0 mothers involved. Like the entire leadership was boys and their fathers.
And that's kind of what it's supposed to be. Yeah.
And the risk tolerance was much higher. The same troop, I went back for a reunion 10, 15 years on. The same troop was then like half mothers in leadership. And they had moved from a summer camp where the boys, make their own dinners over fires to one that they eat in a dining hall. And it's a small thing, but it's a huge thing.
Right.
Right.
I mean, it's
Yeah,
an entirely different camping experience when you're not preparing your own food over a fire.
Yeah, and at least you got the camp. And my observation was like a lot of these things that these kids were supposed to be doing for like merit badges, hiking, campouts, they couldn't do because they weren't allowed to do so. They were only allowed to do so many overnight trips.
Right.
Every overnight trip had to be accompanied by the father. They couldn't be just the scout leaders because they're afraid of kitty diddlers. And like it's all this liability that like we can't play with fire and we can't march outside for more than so many miles and you need permission slips and we can only do like 5 overnighters a year and
What?
yeah, it was ridiculous. I got out. I was just like, I'm not doing this anymore. I got one time I had a couple of boys, so we were playing with lawn darts. As the scouting team. Except they weren't real lawn darts. They were blunt. They looked like they were basically like, hammers with fins at the end that you threw. So they weren't even like real. There's like no inherent danger unless you got conked in the head with one. So we're playing with lawn darts, and 2 of the boys, they get to a fight over who gets whose lawn dart. And I didn't see how it started, but I knew the boys. I had a feeling I knew who started it, and I have a feeling I knew who escalated it. And the boy who I think started it.
At some point, you have a feeling you know how it's going to end.
Exactly. And
somebody's going to get beat with a lawn dart.
Well, that's pretty much what happened. Somebody got hit. The kid that started it comes to me and he complains, and I'm like, okay. So, and then the kid that escalated it and won the fight, he was like, and his dad's a cop, so go figure. So he's like, no, he took the lawn dart from me, and I just took it back, and I'm like, okay. Are you bleeding? No. Okay. Is there any bruising or anything broken? No. You guys are fine. Okay. Do you each have a lawn dart? Okay. Take the sand out of your vaginas. After that, they asked me to stop being a scoutmaster. I have no idea why. So,
yeah, but I bet those boys didn't fight anymore. They
might have pulled me aside on a Sunday and said, "Yeah, you can't use that language around the kids." I'm like,
"Oh, come on!"
I've used words around children.
We would go into the woods and sleep in hammocks because we didn't want to bother setting up the tents, and throw knives and play with fire. We may have at one point injected white gas into an orange and lit it on fire and shot it out of a water balloon launcher.
Potato guns. That was my childhood.
Oh, that sounds awesome, though. I like that.
When I was a kid,
an orange skin will hold an impressive amount of white gas, by the way.
Wow.
And I guess they explode pretty well then too.
I was a kid and I quit Scouts because it wasn't fun. We'd show up, and it was ironic because they would usually pick. A couple times they picked guys who were ex-military. Of course, it was Air Force, so maybe that was the problem.
I thought you said military.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. They needed to get like someone from the Army or the Marines to do this. But the thing that pissed me off is I'd show up and they'd bitch about the uniform, and it was almost like being in JROTC. I swear to God, like they'd make us do push-ups. We didn't actually do anything fun. It was just like, you guys got to look sharp and dress sharp. And so I almost quit Scouts when I was a kid. And then they hired the engineer that went to our church to ask him to volunteer to do this. And he's like, okay, kids, today we are going to work with oxyacetylene. Put on your safety first, kids. And then, just burn shit. So, and then all of a sudden I find myself liking Scouts again.
Yeah.
Funny how that works, huh?
And I admit, and the other thing is to keep in mind, guys do come in different flavors. Because I was going to say, I'm not the outdoors type. I will admit, I'm not the type.
Oh, I hate the outdoors, but I like fire.
Yeah, so do I. So I was going to say, but like the,
had a few run-ins with my local fire department when I was a kid.
And that's important when it comes to understanding proper masculinity. Because one thing that's true is that, when you tell guys not to be men, for instance, and I swear I read this somewhere, and I don't know if either one of you knows it, where this whole thing where you're not allowed to tell people their gender, and that we're supposed to make the kids question their genders, more often than not, it is far more often that you see boys thinking they're girls than the reverse, because it's generally not okay to be a typical boy. So the boys end up getting so frustrated by the fact that they're told not to be boys that when they're then told, well, you can be either one, they say, well, I'd rather be a girl because nobody likes me when I'm a boy.
I wonder if that same push works for why there aren't as many girls who think they're boys, because if you think that being a man sucks, well, right. I don't want to be a boy. Look at the boys. They have it worse off than I do.
Right. And I honestly think that there's something to that. Like I said, it's anecdote, but I'm just saying, I think there's something to that. That the idea that and again, confusing children on gender to me is it's an abuse of the child. You don't tell a child that they're supposed to determine what gender they are, as if they even understand the implications of what that means. And that's another way I think that masculinity is being hurt, when you're being told that essentially it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. If you're a boy, girl, what's the difference? It's all the same. Except we want you to behave like the girls do. But beyond that, don't act as though
you can be whichever gender you like as long as you act like a girl.
Right. So more or less that. And I've read several. I still have yet to finish reading Christina Hoff Sommers' War on Boys. She was talking about the war on boys, and it really is true that we basically drug the boys, and make them act like girls, because God forbid a boy throw things or play in mud and stuff like that. Granted, I was never the type to play in mud, but I did throw things. So,
so X, what are some of your thoughts on other institutions so we talk about Boy Scouts of America. Where else can people turn to if they want to teach their kids, like, this is what it means to be a man, this is what it means to be a protector, a provider, competitive, and so on?
I mean, I really hate to say you're on your own, but
you might very well be, and that's what I was thinking, is you might just have to do it yourself.
With church groups, it's going to be entirely dependent on the church. Two churches of the same denomination can be radically different in character, so it's really hard to say if you're going to have any help there.
Right. And sometimes I think that it's so embedded. I think even women in churches, I think they don't mean to be anti-male in some cases, but they kind of are, because I think it's just kind of gotten embedded. Like you said about the happy wife, happy life thing. Yes. That's, even most guys I know will laugh at that, because it's just kind of an old saying that people hear. But there is something to that, because here's something, and I guess it's funny to me that I remember this and Mike doesn't. Probably he might remember it, but remember when we found on Facebook that list, like somebody posted a list of things, like it was from like 1955, and it was something that a woman should do to be a good wife to her husband and stuff like that. And people read it and were just absolutely outraged and horrified by it. So you wrote a corresponding list of how a husband can be good to his wife.
I vaguely recall that.
And once you wrote that list, because without the list for the husband, the one for the wife sounds horrible, because you're like, oh my God, all these expectations on a wife, do all this stuff. But once
I do remember that I was disappointed
until you realize,
there
is a corresponding list.
Right.
Yeah.
Once you have,
I do remember that the big disappointment with the expectations for the wife was not on the list was not give more head. I did not bring that up. Or maybe I did, but
it might have been mentioned.
Remember, I'll have to find that. I have to go see if I can find that.
That was quite some time ago, but it stuck with me because
like 10 years ago.
Once you wrote the list, once you wrote the other list, then the original list didn't sound so bad at all. It's just, again, it's when the expectations are one-sided, and the same is true now, where the expectations are still one-sided. Now it's okay. It used to be, okay, wives do this for your husbands. Husbands, you have no real clear expectations always for it. Depended on who you were asking, but basically guys kind of do what they do. Women, you need to do this. But now it's the other way around, and I think that's where it is where feminists are now in that position where it's like, okay, now we want the guys to have all the expectations and we'll ask nothing of women, and it's just as bad because when you only have expectations on one side, it's just as bad, you know. And so,
but I feel like it's not one-sided, it's no-sided. No, there are no expectations anymore.
Well,
there's no expectations about what a woman should do in a relationship. There's no expectations about what a man should do except submit to the woman.
Right.
But you know, if there's no expectations from the women, then what good does it do to me to submit? I mean, to submit to someone is to suggest that they're going to do something, that they're going to fulfill some kind of obligation or at least engage in some act that you're going to submit to. There's zero expectation with regards to men and women. As far as it's almost like, what's even the point? I don't even understand the point of having families, of getting married and having kids. Like, what's the point? That was my big takeaway from that article that guy wrote. It's like, okay, why the fuck did you have kids?
Right.
Like, what was the point here? Like, you clearly hate them.
Right.
Like,
Because they're girls, I guess.
Do not love your children. You want to geld them, right, and then send them out to the. And the thing that I find myself kind of, it's kind of the dark side of Mike here. When I meet a guy, like, I'm not an aggressive or a violent person by any stretch of the imagination, but when I meet someone who is that emasculated, my first instinct is to punch them in the face and take their lunch money. Like, I wasn't a bully in high school, but I find myself wanting to indulge that side of me when I meet someone like that. I'm wondering if maybe that's just what we need. Maybe we just need a bunch of like exes.
Bring back bullying.
Make bullying great again.
Well, you know, here's the thing about bullies, though, because I think the thing with bullies, and yes, I know we talk about how, oh my God, the terrible. If anything, if you consider that, you know, people now commit suicide for bullying, but since when was that?
No, wait. This is my stance. They do not commit suicide over bullying. Why they commit suicide is because when they are bullied, which bullying happens, okay, you can't stop bullying, right? All you can do is teach people how to stand up to bullying. But in today's age of zero tolerance policies and, you know, oh, we've all got to get along and hold hands and sing kumbaya, and there's two sides to every story. Like, people
I actually just saw a
impotent.
court case where it's I forget which state it was, but it just came across the wire where they found it illegal to expel a child from school for defending himself in a fight.
Good.
Because the school had tried.
You even needed such a law.
Well,
no, they do.
The school said
Florida,
zero tolerance. If you're in a fight, we're going to expel you both. We're not going to determine who started it or who was at fault or what's going on. You're in a fight. You're both getting expelled, and we're just not going to deal with you. And the state said, no, you can't expel a kid for defending himself.
Right.
Good. And that's how it was in Florida. That's how it was. Like, there was this whole game around getting into a fist fight because you had to get the guy to instigate it. So you had to push him, or, you know, emotionally or verbally. You had to get him to a point where he'd want to throw the first punch. Then you could claim self-defense. Then that's going to get you off the hook. But then you could at least threaten to sue if and this is Florida, so of course, you know, you could swing a stick and find a lawyer. And that was how you got out of it. But that was always the threat that loomed over you, is that if you got into a fight, and I honestly think that's what's causing the suicide rate with bullying. It's because when you take away people's ability to defend themselves, and you actually see this in countries where you take away their right to keep and bear arms, suicide rates go up.
Right.
Which you would think they would at least go down to kind of mitigate, you know, offset the gun suicides, but they don't. The suicide rates go up in these countries. There is something inherently correlative to feeling powerless, to feeling impotent, and depression, and feeling like, you know what, I have no out except to kill myself. So I don't think it's bullying. I feel very passionately. It's not about bullying. It is absolutely about taking away kids' ability to beat the living shit out of the guy that's tormenting them, which is what they should be able to do.
Well, plus, here's the other thing, and the other end of that to me is, because I know that when I was coming up, I think my inherent understanding of dealing with bullies was that, in a sense, you could use bullies as a way for self-improvement. You know, that everybody said bullying was bad, but at the same time, it was like, okay, but usually when someone bullied you, today we're supposed to say, oh my God, that bully is terrible and we need to stop bullying. But honestly, when I was young, what I was told was, okay, learn how to stand up to the bully. Here are ways that you can keep that, you know.
I learned how to cuss people out because my dad would be like, okay, look, when the guy says he's going to like, when the guy's messing with you, just tell him to fuck off or say to him, blow me. Like,
right.
you just, like, I was like, I had to ask my dad what that meant, and that was an awkward conversation, but.
but I think that's it, because overcoming bullies, I think, is a point of growth. And I think especially for boys, I think that's especially true of boys. And yes, I think obviously you should keep things from getting out of hand. But I think if boys start fighting, I think it's like you were saying, boys fight. They're going to do that because that's what boys tend to do. And then you let them resolve things, because it's that old cliche thing about how girls hold grudges, whereas the boys, they fight the next day. Like, the fighting literally is part of the healing process, whereas girls will like hold grudges against each other for a long time. You know,
I'll actually say this: I'm actually great. I was bullied a lot as a child, and I'm actually grateful for that, because it taught me a lot about the kind of person I didn't want to be, because bullies are assholes. But two, it gave me an incentive to actually stand up for myself, to be assertive, to be confident, right? Because bullies are they're basically predators, right? A bully senses weakness. A bully senses that you are intimidated, or that you lack confidence, or that you're an easy mark, and they go after you. And so if you learn from those experiences how not to be pushed around, you actually grow and develop. And yeah, like to your point, John, like you don't want to let things get out of hand. I've seen some fights get out of hand in my lifetime.
Right.
You know, when they start picking up cafeteria chairs and blaming each other, that's maybe when you step in. That actually did happen, by the way. We had a bunch of wannabe gangs. They were like wannabe Bloods and Crips, but really all they were was from rival high schools, and they lived in different streets, and they were stupid. And they'd go to each other's schools, and they'd beat the living shit out of each other, and you're like, for what? You guys didn't even sell drugs. Like, what the hell?
Well, like I said, the standard you had for those two boys. Is anything broken? Are you bleeding? Was any permanent harm done? The answer is no. They'll be okay. It's fine. Boys do that. They're fine. You know, boys aren't delicate, and I think that's the issue where mothers, as well intentioned as they can be, I think oftentimes may not get that. You know, they're always, you know, my mom's like that. She's incredibly, very, very protective of everything. Like, oh my God, this is too heavy for you to lift. Don't lift that too. I'm fine. Well, it's all good. You know, it's like, you know, if I say I can do it, just leave it be. I got it. You know, that kind of thing. But I think that's the general impulse of a lot of, especially mothers. I think, and it's not that their intentions are bad, because they're not. It's just they may not understand that, you know, a boy might need to sometimes get a little hurt to, you know, he'll be fine. A little
pain is good.
A little minor injury is not that big of a problem.
Pain is temporary. Glory is forever. Chicks get scars, bones heal, all that fun stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah, but it's good that they learn to manage aggression when they're small and their aggression can't do that much damage.
Right.
Right.
Rather than
that's also a very good point, because men are inherently aggressive. We're the hunter in the hunter-gatherer society. Right? So do you want us to be aggressive when we're big and strong and and physically do permanent damage? Or would you like us to be, you know, aggressive when we're little shits and we can get the shit knocked out of us pretty easily, and then I say, oh, that's bad. We won't do that again.
Well, and people mistake controlling your emotions for suppressing them, because that's the other thing you hear all the time, is that no, toxic masculinity is bad for men too, because they're taught to never be emotional. No, we're taught to control our emotions, not suppress them, control them. That's important to do. You know, and there is a difference. Suppress means I act like I never feel anything. Control means I know what I feel, but I have to reason. I have to think about what are the consequences of my actions, even when I feel like I'm, you know, even when I feel something volatile. How do I channel that into something useful? You know,
John and I like to have a good cry over a chick flick every now and then, just to remind us how to feel.
I cry over Remember the Titans every time.
you know what? Where I get welled up is in that scene from Black Hawk Down when they call in the air support and those helicopters just like mow down like 500 Somalis at once. I like get weepy when that happens. I don't know why. It's just like, it's so beautiful.
should maybe have a question on Twitter for that. Is, you know, what makes men cry in movies? Like, you know, what?
I think I did see that actually. So X, what would you, if you could talk to this guy, the guy that wrote this article, or anyone that like thinks like him or agrees with him, what are some things you would say to him?
Oh God, I don't know that I want to talk to him. I think he's beyond saving. I want to save his children, but I don't think that I don't know that he can be saved. Like, I can see the impulse in him. He knows that it's sick to want to emasculate his children because he sees them happy in doing boy things, and he wants them to be happy and do boy things. So even though his entire education has been boys are bad, boys are evil, there shouldn't be boy things, and you shouldn't want them to do boy stuff. Like, he sees them happy, and he moved out to where they could play sports and run around and be boys. Like, he's trying to fight the conditioning.
Right. That's what it sounded like too. Like, yeah, he's been conditioned and programmed in one way, but he's just like, but I can't. But
my academically, I'm sure before he had sons, he believed it wholeheartedly, and now he sees his son happily, fulfilling the stereotype, and he's going, but masculinity bad, masculinity toxic, and then he sees his son. It's like, but I can't do that to him.
But I can't think of my kids as toxic because reality does an amazing job of just selling ideas.
Yeah.
Yep. That's usually how it goes.
Well, and this ties, I think, a little bit to the ADD epidemic in America. There's a documentary on Netflix that I just started watching with my wife. They haven't finished it yet, but it's called "Take Your Pills." Have you seen that, either of you?
No, I haven't seen that. No.
So it's about the use of Adderall and Ritalin in America. America, we diagnose ADD more than any other country in the world. Apparently, like 11% of our population has ADD. And I haven't finished it, but it right now it's going into kind of what drives us as a culture to basically pump our kids full of amphetamines. And I kind of have to wonder, like, because boys typically are diagnosed more with ADD or ADHD or some whatever,
that's what
than girls are, and it can't be good that we're basically giving boys amphetamines at a very early age.
Oh no!
Nancy Reagan says just say no.
What?
Nancy Reagan told me to just say no.
I mean, I've taken Adderall. It's a hell of a drug, let me tell you what. But I wish I had that shit in college. What? Yeah, it is speed. That's exactly what it is.
That's why you reminded me of those power thirsts. Like power.
Does anybody want to buy a T-shirt?
Like power thirst is crystal meth in a can. Power thirst is crystal meth. It was like, sorry, that was just.
I really wish I had amphetamines in college because I would have done a lot better academically in college. Would have been a 4.0 GPA.
Hey guys, I got to drop out unexpectedly. Sorry about that.
Not a problem. Thanks for coming on, and we'll make sure to have people follow you so they can get more riveting masculine opinions.
Yeah.
Take care.
The language is usually worse than I've used here today.
Oh yes, it's definitely not suitable for work or family friendly, but it's still fun all the same.
I usually put up the warning, like, if you have a problem with harsh language, probably not going to want to follow that account.
Or Holocaust humor. Or dark humor. Yeah. Or basically, if you have a stick up your ass, just don't follow it. Yeah. But
I may occasionally make Holocaust jokes and use racial slurs just to filter out my follows.
That's actually a good way to
the herd, weeding out the weak.
It's a good way to do it these days.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on, X. We appreciate you, and we'll let you get taken care of whatever you need to take care of.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Have a good night now.
Yep. Well,
all right. So that was a good conversation. So we still got 10 minutes left. So if you guys have any questions about what we've talked today, or if any thoughts or comments, feel free to mention in the live stream. John and I will continue to discuss this, of course, because I think this is something I'm very passionate about, because I don't seem, when I was a kid, and I think part of the reason I was bullied as a kid is because I didn't live up to the masculine stereotype. I was the nerdy, quiet, sensitive guy. I was a $135 wet. Was not at all muscular, or big in size, and not for lack of trying. But I wasn't an athlete. Like I didn't do those things as a kid, and I feel like I missed out on a lot as a kid. Like I kind of wish I could go back and do more sports. I kind of wish I could go back and do some of the boy things that I didn't do as a kid. No, I did. I mean, I did other things that I enjoyed doing. I did martial arts. I played D&D and nerdy things. I liked my nerdy boy things. I
didn't play D&D till after high school, but
in high school is when I got into that stuff. So
for me, it was a few years after it, but and martial arts was a big thing for me too. And I think that's great for any boy, well, really any child, but especially for a boy, because one of the things martial arts teaches is discipline. It's the idea of, again, that controlling of your impulses. Teaches you how to fight, but also teaches you when to fight and when not to. That says you need to learn when it's appropriate to use what you're learning and when it's not appropriate to use what you're learning. It teaches that discipline, because I learned it early.
And freedom reconnection in the chat brings up a good point about parental laziness. I think that's a good explanation for a lot of the problems in society. It's intellectual laziness, parental laziness. It's easy to drug your kid, because if you drug your kid, then he's not as much of a pain in the ass. Right. So you don't have to whoop him. You don't have to discipline him. Like my kids, both my girls, they are wild children.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's genetic. I'm sure that's genetic. I'm sure I had a hand in that. But it's challenging, like especially with my oldest, because she has a temper. She mouths off, and I mean she's only 2.5.
Oh yeah, sounds like you.
Yeah, and I mean this kid is, when she's good, she's great. I love being a dad. I love her to death. When she's bad, she's really, really bad, and I'm just like, here, honey, this is your kid. You take care of it.
It's and ultimately, like I said, having occasion, because again, being a parent, in my case, it's difficult because I really don't get to do it on a full-time basis. But the thing is just that
it is a full-time job.
Yeah, as much as I would love to do it full-time, unfortunately, I badly picked his mother. But and that's really my own fault there. But the thing is just that ultimately, I still relish the idea that I want, as much as I can, to raise my own son to be someone who, because one of the things he's very smart. He's very but he's also like me. He wants to get the most results out of the least amount of work, which can be a good thing or not. And so, that's something I would love to be able to sit down with him and talk about and stuff like that. And it's just like, well, all these things are about, because part of it is knowing what kind of man you want to be. Because, there are different kinds of men, like I said, you've got the rough types. I think we were talking about, who was it? X, and there's one other person that we were talking about, Browning Machine, who has the ability to build a cabin with his bare hands, that type of guy,
Yeah, and so I would love to be able to do that. I didn't learn how to do that. Like I learned how to do that in school. I learned how to do some of that in school as an engineer.
Right.
But even engineering doesn't really teach you how to build things. It just teaches you how to design things.
No, you can build things that build things
out there. And it's actually kind of a running gag. Right. Is the engineer who knows how to design the perfect thing that can't be built. And I've seen that. Like, that's not me. I usually try to learn. Well, that's one of the reasons I like learning how to build things, is because when I design something, I want to be able to take it to the people that are going to build it and not have them laugh in my face and say, "Do you even fucking know how to work a hammer, dude? This is impossible to build."
Right. And
so that's important. Those are useful skills to have, even if you don't use them. Like, I don't use half of what I learned in engineering. But it was a useful skill to have, because I learned how to think analytically. I learned how to be a creative problem solver. And I think that's part of what boys are missing out on. Girls too. I mean, there's no skill set that I believe, there's no skill set that is unique to men or women. Like, there are skill sets that some are better tailored to one gender over the other. Obviously, anything that requires physical strength or endurance is going to be better suited for a man, just like anything that requires, I think, being smaller or
general communications, things like that. I tend to think, because again, teaching is heavily made up of women. I think partly well, there's probably other reasons for that, but I was going to say.
So I honestly don't. I don't think you can, unless it's physical labor. I don't think there's a profession you can point to where you say, okay, that one's better suited for men. They're like, obviously, there are different skill sets that each brings to the table. I mean, men tend to be more focused, right? So if it's something that requires laser-like concentration, men are going to be more apt in that. That's not to say a woman can't do it. It's just going to be unless her personality is geared that way, it's going to be more of a challenge for her. So, just as it is for women when it comes to multitasking. Women are better at multitasking. You have to be able to multitask as a mom so that when you have your 5 kids running around the house, they don't burn the place to the ground in front of your eyes. You have to be able to multitask.
Even
men don't have to do that. We focus on the hunt, we focus on the kill, and then we go and we get it.
Right. So yeah, and I think that's important. And again, as I said, always it's knowing what kind of man you are. It's understanding that masculinity is not a singular, as in like
separate but equal works when it comes to men and women. Let's put it that way, okay?
Right. And I
absolutely believe in separate but equal.
Yeah, I was going to say someone's going to take that out of context, I'm sure.
I hope they do. Fuck those people, but I hope they do.
So, yeah. But that's all there is to it. And I think that by destroying under a proper understanding of what masculinity is, you do a disservice to everyone. You do a disservice to women who no longer have men who are strong, who will protect them and provide for them. You do a disservice to children who need their fathers in order to be able to grow, especially boys, to be able to control and understand how to control their aggression, things like that. Girls who then don't understand how to be treated, by men. Across the board, when you destroy masculinity, everyone suffers. Everybody does. And I think that's just the whole takeaway there is just that ultimately everybody suffers in this case. And if we're going to fix that, like X said, we might be on our own. Each of us have to kind of maybe form our own communities, but ultimately it's up to us.
That's where I say, and X actually had a really good point about going into the priesthood. And that's actually something where I'm kind of grateful for my faith, because in my faith, all men are in the priesthood. And there is very much this sense of male camaraderie. In fact, our third hour of church, so we have church for 3 hours, right? The first hour is kind of like basically the equivalent of mass. The second hour is Sunday school. It's combined. There's different classes you can take depending on how long you've been a member of the church and what your interests lie. And then the third hour, the men go to one class and the women go to another class, and they learn the same things, but they learn them from the perspective of men and women. And I have to say that's actually, I'm really grateful for that organization, because I think, if you have, I get the mentality of, well, you're on your own, because in today's age of society, where can you go to? But you have to find those groups, right? There has to be those spaces where men can be men without being douchebags like the MGTOW people. Where men can be men, where they can learn to be protective, courageous, competitive, all the things that make a man without making him an asshole, right? And that's what we need. And if you're not Mormon, then find something similar, right? Go somewhere where you can bond with men, where you can have fun and be spiritual and be emotional and be intellectual and be physical, not sexual, physical, guys. Come on. With also, other men.
Lecter, not Twitter.
So anyway, it's funny. It's really hard to have these conversations in today's society without being accused of being misogynist or sexist, and that's really bad, because these are conversations we need to have. This push to the sissifying of men, the emasculating of men is dangerous, I think, to society. Mm-hmm. It's dangerous to families. It's dangerous to marriage. It's dangerous to business. It's dangerous in politics. It's dangerous in world affairs. Like I can't think of a single example where it is good to emasculate men collectively, right? Where it will raise the generation of geldings. Like there's no benefit to us as a society to have weak men and to have, uncourageous and it's like what C.S. Lewis said, men without chests. Mm-hmm. So that's all the time we got for tonight, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks again for Mr. X for joining us. And I mean, if you don't follow Mr. X, definitely follow him at Glomar Never Dies. Is his tag. Great guy. He's got some really profound insights, and the guy is like a walking epitome of testosterone. Former Marine, former DEA, successful lawyer, husband, father. Great guy. So make sure you're following him. Make sure you're following us at ornery_opinions. Follow John at Kemuri Hidioku. And also, we're going to give a quick shout out. We've made we're doing a little bit of changes with the Ornery Young Guns here. I will be contributing regularly to Halsey News, Steph McWilliams. So make sure you're following at Steph McWilliams so that you can get regular updates of articles that I will be writing for them. I'm going to try to do an article a week. So, and if you guys want to read more thoughts on masculinity and politics and religion from yours truly, then make sure you're following at Steph McWilliams as well. So if you guys have any thoughts about who you'd like to see in the show, or if you any topics you want us to cover, shoot us a DM at ornery_opinions, and we'd love to hear from you. So you guys have a good night. Have a happy Easter, and good night. We'll see you next week.